Jessica, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. And I can hear you just fine.
Great.
Council, I'll call this meeting to order. For the record, it is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 at 4:33 p.m. We will begin this meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh?
Here.
Councilwoman Perot?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here?
Councilman Byrne?
Here.
Mayor Simonson?
Here.
And Councilman Borden is joining the meeting soon.
Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Byrne.
I move that we adopt the agenda as published.
Second. I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next item is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and for the clerk to attest.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Consent agenda is agreed to. There are no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will move on to community presentations. Item 13, the Western Native Recreation District discussion. And I will turn this over to Mr. Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I got my proper distance here. Thanks for having me today. I'm here on behalf of the Western Native Recreation District. I'm the chairman of that organization. I have two other commissioners who are elected officials, Tyler Roundtree and Heath Van Patten. I would like to acknowledge in the audience Charlie Roundtree, which was commissioner and a chairman of that organization for over 20 years. So thanks for being here, Charlie. The Western Native Recreation District was formed in 1971 to build the community pool and accomplish that, which is in Story Park. So that was its original intent. And back then, Meridian was a much smaller community than it is today. I'm going to give you a little bit of history just because that's one of the big questions is who is the Western Native Recreation District? So we built that pool. The city had a very small parks department at that time, and so Western Native Recreation District sort of functioned as part of the city parks department, and acquired Fuller Park, which is still on 10 Mile, and was actually outside of the city limits. And that was the Meridian Little League Park was built by dads and older brothers and community involvement, and today continues to serve the Little League community as well as the rest of the community. The city and the Western Native Recreation District, and talking about Fuller Park, began having some conversations about, Meridian's a very different community than it was. The Western Native Recreation District essentially encompasses the entire community of Meridian, and the Western Native Rec District Board started talking about, whether there was a potential duplication of services, and whether the city could function better in that park. And so we actually created a partnership, and by which the city managed Fuller Park. We made capital improvements to that asset, and after 1 year of management, the city actually took ownership of the park. As a result of that, the Western Native Recreation District lowered its taxable rate to match essentially what we were operating with that park. And so that was a commitment that we made on behalf of the community as well as the city. So in 2016, the Western Native Recreation District spent about $3 million renovating our pool asset, and made a great improvement out there, and that asset functions very well in the community. So what brings us here today? So after the election, the mayor and I began a discussion about what is the future of the Western Native Recreation District, right? So what are our future goals? We had transferred an asset to the city, and we had expressed an interest in the future about talking about the pool. These are not new conversations, but we wanted to say, okay, how do we best use our resources? And so we began talking about what happens in other communities. And in other communities around the state and around the country, frankly, typically a golf course will create excess capital funds, right? So it will operate, and the revenues will exceed the expenses for that particular asset. And in addition to that, typically we see the aquatics assets exactly reverse of that. So the revenues typically don't cover the expenses for those communities. In this particular case, the Meridian Community Pool actually has program revenues which pay beyond what our expenses are, but it doesn't necessarily cash flow capital improvements. And so we began the discussion if in a typical community a golf course can augment some of those aquatics kind of activities, then it evens things out on the tax basis. And so the Western Native Recreation District began negotiation with Lakeview investors. which is the operator of the Lakeview Golf Course. And a little bit about that, the original lease with Cherry Lane Recreation was renewed in 1999. And just a little history of the golf course. I know a lot of people have some history, but that was built by the original operator and had a long-term lease in place again, which renewed in 1999. The city didn't expend capital funds towards the improvements on the golf course. That was the operator themselves that put that in, and the original developers of the course. In 2005, the lease was transferred to Lakeview investors with all of the assets in place, and that is the current operator that we are negotiating with. So the highlights of the purchase agreement for the Western Nato Recreation District are the purchase of all of the assets, including the clubhouse. And just for the current operator owns the clubhouse. They own all of the machinery, all of the carts, and the liquor license. And so all of that is contemplated to be part of the purchase and sale agreement negotiated by Western Nato Rec. As well as the lease, purchasing the lease asset. Our anticipation is closing on October 8th. That agreement is contingent upon a management agreement with the city, which brings us here today. So our proposal is this, is that, and we've worked with the Parks Department and the Leaks Department and the Legal Department, and that's why we're here today to talk about the management agreement. Western Nato Recreation District anticipates to close on the property and then bring the city in to manage this particular asset. One of our commitments to that is to spend $60,000 on a master plan. In working with the Parks Department, they need an irrigation audit. There are some water rights issues, and there are some things that need cleaned up. And so Western Nato Recreation District will consider spending $60,000 on that master plan, which will be, and I've talked to the Parks Department, a very public, have a lot of public involvement in that process. I'm just going to hit a couple more highlights on the management agreement. The terms of the agreement are 3 years. Again, master plan, and then the city will be in charge of maintenance and operation of the facility. It is our anticipation that after that period of time, so just to back up one more real quickly, within the state statute, recreation districts have the authority specifically to be in the aquatics business, which we are. They also have the statutory authority to be in the golf business, which is where this would fall under. Our proposal to the city, again, much like the Fuller Park, is that Western Nato Recreation District can spend its capital funds on assets which are owned, which they are involved in. It's our anticipation that we would make this purchase. The city would manage the asset for us. The city would then take over management of the aquatics asset in the future, and that eventually the Western Nato Recreation District would transfer those assets to the city of Meridian and get out of the taxing business. So that is the overall strategy and plan, and I've hit the highlights on our management agreement. Just a couple timelines. I'm here today in front of you to answer questions, to talk officially about this management agreement. We have a meeting on Thursday at 12 o'clock. The item on the agenda is the purchase and sale agreement, so it could be considered there along with our next year's budget, which has the total amount for the purchase and sale in there. So could be authorized Thursday. If that doesn't happen this week, we would hold a special meeting, again, which would all be public meetings. So nothing has been decided either on the city side or Western Nato Recreation District's behalf. And with that, I would, Bill, did I cover all the highlights for the management agreement? Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Wardle?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
So what you're saying, Sean, thank you for that presentation, by the way. Well done. Appreciate you being here. So what you're saying is so you would take control of the golf course, whatever that date was in October, and then we would sign a management agreement that would last for 3 years, and what would happen at the end of that 3 years?
So that's what we are anticipating, that at the end of 3 years, we would transfer the asset to the city of Meridian. So the agreement reads that we hold possession of the asset. We're in control of the liquor license, but have an operator that operating it on our behalf. So our anticipation that along with the aquatic asset, the Meridian Community Pool, that we would transfer all of those, all of our holdings to the city of Meridian.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
question for Mr. Nair and Mr. Wardle. Is there an ability to either extend that timeline out further if needed, or to accelerate it faster if desired?
I can start that, I guess. It can be altered. I think there has been conversation with council for Ward maybe not wanting to have that option, but I think we still have had that discussion that can happen, but it really is sort of Ward's timing.
So from Western Native Recreation, from our perspective, the answer is yes. We again, it's our anticipation. We have funds that we've collected, tax funds, which have to, which we understand have to be spent on our assets, either the pool or this new asset. And once those funds have been expended, and we're no longer taxing, we would want to move that up if possible.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor, Sean, I just want to be certain we're all on the same page. And the question was about the assets being transferred, and you said all of the assets would be transferred. And I think a lot of people are thinking golf course in 3 years. Where does the pool fall in that timeline? Is that also 3 years?
So to answer that specific question, the pool is not part of this management agreement. That would be a separate agreement that we would enter into. And in talking with the Parks Department, this is really a sort of two-step process. They want to operate the golf course in such a manner that enhances the neighborhood, enhances the community, and really becomes a great place to be. And so they didn't want to be focused on also having to pick up the pool asset. We are managing that efficiently at the time being, and anticipate we could do that for another 3 years. I would say that a likely timeline would be that we would have another full pool season, and then we could start talking about transferring the asset, or at least managing it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
maybe just a clarification or just taking a step back. For people that are watching this kind of out of nowhere, that the city, and maybe if Mr. Neri or even Mr. Wardle wants to just explain the background, that the city already owns the land that the golf course is on. And so, it sounds like to sort of operate it to its best and highest use and make the appropriate investments that are needed for it, that this would make sense at some point, and that we could use a management company. Maybe just a little background might be helpful for people that we're already in the golf business, because we already own this property.
Yeah, so just to back up a little further, the city does own the ground, essentially. The operating entity does own all of the improvements, including the building. And so I know that's not a typical thing that you see in real estate. This particular transaction would clean all of that up, meaning that all of the assets are now owned by a public entity. One of the other things that I can say, and I've been involved in this for a long time, is there's been significant pushback, both from elected officials and some of the rest of the community, to use public dollars on an asset that's managed by a private entity that's a for-profit entity. And so this transaction actually brings everything back into the public realm with those public dollars.
Sean, and I just want to first start by saying thank you. I know this has been a lot of work since our first conversation, and I know you've taken it very seriously, and I appreciate working with Eric in this as well, because these are community assets, whether it's the golf course, the things on it, the pool, and having a long-term sustainable plan that makes sense for the community, that, to your point, allows public investment in upkeep and operations in a meaningful way so that there's not these challenges about who's responsible for what. It really cleans up the underlying issues that would continue to exist under the current scenario and allows the city to, invest in an important community asset for our community. I know there's always concerns about the cost of what this is, but we currently are in the business of things that don't make money. Parks don't make money, and we have those. You do have certain parts of parks that you see a return on your investment in terms of, never fully, but you at least cover your operational costs when it comes to renting out shelters and having them taken care of. So that's what this is. But the underlying ground of a park, you never recover the cost of upkeep, maintenance, long-term fixes that need to occur through your fees, whether that's a home court, the building, or anything else. So we need to be in making sure that these are amenities that have a long-term value to the neighbors, to the community that use them, and to the taxpayers who pay for them. So thank you for all your work in getting this to this point.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Borton, did you have a question? I see you're...
I do, Mr. Mayor. A question for either Sean or Bill. Can you just talk briefly about the closing of this transaction to occur in early October, and confirming that the funding provided for this also provides or ensures that all of the assets included in the purchase will become free and clear of any and all encumbrances. So when they're then ultimately transferred to the city, we have assurances from day one that there are no liens or other obligations that encumber anything.
That is part of the agreement, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Borton. That was anticipated as part of this transaction, was that it would all be done prior to transfer.
So one of the negotiation points has been the need to close on the 8th of October, and on the 9th, the city begins the management contract. Certainly there's preparation prior to that, but that's how the transaction works. I understand that there's a funding mechanism that needs to be in place that is anticipated to happen potentially that Tuesday, which would coincide with the management agreement. Our purchase and sale agreement requires that all assets come to us free and clear, and there's actually a guarantee by the operator in that agreement for that to happen, in addition to the title insurance we'll be purchasing.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Quick follow-up on that is, at that closing, I don't know who the closing agent is, but will Ward be in receipt of UCC releases and lien waivers and anything and everything under the sun to ensure those proceeds are transferred to any third-party creditor at closing, as opposed to provided to a creditor via the seller? Just so there's absolutely no chance for a loose end.
Yes, so our legal counsel is currently working on all of those exhibits, which are exhibit to the purchase and sale agreement. They're not completed yet, which is why the document's not public yet for our consideration on Thursday. But we will have all of those in place prior to the board considering that purchase and sale.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
in terms of process, what are next step options, decision points for this body?
Mr. Neri, would you like to speak to that?
Certainly. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so you have on your agenda tonight these agreements that we have worked out with Western Ada. They are listed as an action item. You certainly are able to take action on them now, this week, if you wish. If you'd like to delay a week so you have an opportunity for further review or discussion, I think a week is fine. I don't know if that's much further than that, I think it pushes some timelines for Western Ada as well. So I think we would like to, move this forward. If there's concerns, we hopefully can answer them for you. Mr. Baird is on the line as well, and he helped craft these with Ward's attorney. So if you have specific about the agreement itself, he could probably answer that too.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Neri, where is this on the
I don't
agenda?
see it on the agenda as an action item.
It's listed on the agenda that I have. So
It's not
we
the
had
one I have
submitted
in
them
front
to
of,
we'd
yeah.
submitted them to the clerk's office, and we put them in the.
maybe it's just the ones that are put in front of us that we don't have.
Oh.
It's a community presentation,
Yeah,
but it's an community presentation action.
Yeah, the agreements, I think, are in your packet.
Mr. Mayor, they are.
Mm-hmm.
I just,
I would think it would need to be listed as a separate item as an agreement.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. The one I had, it was listed as a separate item, so I didn't realize until I saw this today that they're not there the same way.
This is Mr. Mayor.
Council Cavanagh.
I appreciate the desire of Ward to try and meet and have this addressed as part of your budget hearing, but I am concerned. I think this is likely the right decision for our community and something I'm conceptually supportive of moving forward. From a process standpoint, I would almost want to have this back next week for us as an agenda item with the agreements listed separately. Recognizing that's going to require your body to likely have a special meeting. I apologize for that, but I think that's the appropriate approach.
So, if what I'm hearing you say is, we need an action item on the agenda, which would need to be properly noticed. So next Tuesday would be, the next meeting. So our process will look like this, and we can adjust to that. We were anticipating a potential. So we'll have our meeting on Thursday. It is a draft budget hearing. This item is in the budget for next fiscal year, so we'll discuss that item, and the public's welcome to attend via Zoom. And so we'll have that discussion. We have noticed the purchase and sale agreement as well as the approval of the management agreement with the city. So we'll remove consideration of those items, and we'll essentially notice. We'll have a special meeting next week after your Tuesday meeting to do that. So, and we'll provide, again, ample notice for the public, anyone that wants to provide input on that.
And, Mr. Mayor,
Council Cavanagh.
I'll leave it to you and the council president and maybe the council to weigh in on this. While I recognize that the land at which the golf course sits on is a city-owned asset, and some of these changes are somewhat administrative, my preference would be that we include some form of a public comment or a public hearing around this to allow our citizens to weigh in on these potential changes.
Duly noted.
All right, thank you.
Any final questions from Mr. Wardle at this time?
No.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to item 14.
This is what I get to.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burr.
I move that we
I'll
move
talk with Chris.
into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206A, 1A, and 74-2061F.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn executive session. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Cavanagh?
Aye.
Perot? Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Byrne?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
move that we, come out of executive session.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council, I will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 at 6:01 p.m. We will begin tonight's meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton?
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh?
Here.
Councilwoman Perot?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Burnt?
Here.
Mayor Simison?
Here. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Item number 3 is our invocation, which will be led by Pastor David Snyder. Pastor Snyder, if you'd like to come forward, and for anyone joining us in the audience or online to join us in the invocation or take this time for a moment of silence, reflection upon where we are as a country.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, it is good to be able to pray, call on you, and ask you to be present in the city, in this meeting. We believe, Lord, that your presence actually resides where people invite you to be. So I pray for your wisdom. Be present for Mayor Simison, for the city council. Pray that your blessing, Lord, would help them to choose wisely for the good of this city. Pray, Father, that you would bless our fire department, police department, all of our first responders, teachers. Lord, we just believe this is a blessed city, and we pray that you continue to give us your favor. And in all things, Father, we pray that we would remember that it's because of you we're blessed, not because of us, because of your grace, not because of what we've done. We pray in humility, Father, that we would remember that you are the giver of all good things. We bless you in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for letting me be here. Bless you guys today.
Thank you.
Pastor David.
The next item up is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Yeah, I asked this because I look at the agenda I have something that says consent agenda and items moved from the consent is crossed out. Were they on the agenda or were they not on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, they were published on the agenda, but there are no items. This is growing pains with the new system, but a consent agenda and items moved from consent, there's neither.
Okay. Well, we'll move past those items that are on the agenda but not part of the agenda. Do we have anyone signed up under the public forum for future topics?
Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay. Then with that, we will move into our community items, and we'll turn this over to Republic Service for an update on the COVID-19 operation. And I'll turn this over to Ms. Klein.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be back here. Rochelle Klein with the Republic Services, 2130 West Franklin Road in Meridian. And I had the opportunity last week to speak with Dale Bolthouse, and he thought it was a good time to come and give you guys an update on services and what's going on operationally behind the scenes here in the midst of this pandemic and providing solid waste services, which is definitely a critical service, even probably more so during this time than ever. So we are 5 months into this, and we've been very fortunate, I guess in early March, for March, April, May, June, July, so we're 5 months into this now. We've been really fortunate to be able to provide services as scheduled. So we have had a few drivers get sick. More recently, we've had up to, 14 or 15 get sick at one time, which has really stressed our system. But we have floaters in place and lead drivers in place, and we also have a crew that's been able to cover those services despite those that have been out. One thing that makes Meridian different, I think what happened is we have public works directors that share a lot of information because they work really closely in the valley. And one of the questions was, how is Meridian faring in this? And you guys are safe. I want to make sure that you guys know that your services are not at risk of being altered at this time. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that we did a reroute in Meridian not too long ago. So we built in capacity. Normally, let's say a residential route would pick up 800 households in a day. And we built in the capacity for the new subdivisions coming online. So we have about 500 houses to a route, particularly out towards the new Costco and then south of the freeway. So those drivers, even though some of their crewmates are gone, they're able to get their routes done and then swing over. They have the time during the day to get their fellow, coworkers work done during that same window of time during the day. We also have, we came to you guys early on and asked for your support in starting services earlier. So we threw out groups of 10 at a time, and we actually left Meridian in place. So because Boise has so many routes, we moved them to an early start, and so they started crewing out earlier, and Meridian kept the same time slot. So there's not a real mix in the crews of drivers between the municipalities. So the risk that we had in other areas that have two-person routes, we have two people in a truck, and they're constantly switching who's driving, and it's really close quarters. We don't have that situation in Meridian. These are automated side load trucks. So we have one driver, one cab, one route. So that's really helped our situation. And those drivers that were sick have been coming back now. So we implemented, in addition to cab sterilizations and masks and social distancing, and hand sanitizer in every cab, we have now masks are mandatory. So before, early on, they were optional, and now they're mandatory. So everybody that leaves their cab during the day has to have a mask on. Or if they're in the office, they have to have a mask. So that has really helped. So if by chance something were to happen, we have worked closely with Tom Audi in Public Works. And again, we're really fortunate because we have a hierarchy that would leave the general public, for the most part, pretty unaffected. So the first things that we would suspend if we really had a labor shortage would be subscription programs like glass and grass only. So those are subscription routes that would free up a driver if we suspended those, and would really not affect very many households. And the other thing we could go back to doing, which we did early on, was suspend bulky item collection, because those are just people that would like us to come to their house to pick up a bulky item, and they're generally not urgent requests. And so we also let those people bring the items for free to the Meridian transfer station if we can't get to their house. So we're in a pretty good spot. But if we ever got to the point, one of the questions I was asked was, is there anywhere in the country where you're just having to landfill everything just to keep solid waste moving through? And the answer to that is no. So far we've been able to stay ahead of that. In other areas of the country, we've moved in what are called blue crews, which are teams of drivers that support different business units when we have a labor shortage. Idaho is still considered a hot spot, so we can't move drivers in here at this time from out of state to support us. And we're really aware of that. So we're working really carefully to make sure everyone stays healthy. But if we ever got to that situation, and we, if it wasn't enough to suspend grass and glass and bulky items, then we would have, a communication plan in place. So we would send out a call them all text message, which if you're a Meridian resident, I'm sure you've gotten these from us before. You get a phone call and a text message announcing whatever it is that's coming up, whether it's spring cleanup or, fall leaf collection or things like bulky items changing. We would make sure we reached out to everybody, and then the city also has the Meridian Trash Talk website or Facebook page, and then social media like Twitter and Facebook, Nextdoor and things like that. So we've been working with Tom. We want to make sure that you're covered for a collection perspective, and in the event that something would happen that we couldn't get everything picked up according to schedule, then we would make sure that was well communicated ahead of time to all the residents and businesses. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Rochelle. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Council Cavanagh.
Cheryl, thanks for being here. Nice to see you.
Sure, thanks.
I'm just curious, just from a collection standpoint, are you collecting above average, below average, or on average now than you were 6 months ago?
So, Councilman Kevin and Mayor Simpson, we started early on just picking up more garbage than we could imagine. I think everybody was in purge mode. They didn't know how long the pandemic would last, so everybody was cleaning up at home. We saw a huge spike in residential volumes. But then now it's tapered off. So I think people have done the work. They're living cleanly. They're at home all day, so they're more sensitive to what they're bringing in. And most people are still working remotely, has been our experience. So we're seeing people starting to throw away the average volume again, which is nice. So we had probably 3 months where we really saw a lot of waste going in. And people's offices, so commercial trash volumes dropped and residential trash volumes spiked, which we anticipated. So, yeah, we're starting to finally see that level off. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
Not a question, but a comment. Always love to see you. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let Mark know and the team that we appreciate everything the Republic does.
I will, yeah. Thank you. All right. And I'll have my contact information if you need anything else. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Council, our next action item is an appeal of denial of mobile cells unit license MSU 20-0038. Listed under the city clerk, but I have down Harper. I don't know if it's going to take it from here.
Mr. Mayor, I can introduce the topic. We denied an application for mobile sales unit license, as you said, for Angelo Medina. Mr. Medina is here, as well as his supervisor with TDS, but I thought Lieutenant Harper may want to give you a brief overview on the basis of the denial.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This denial, as we've spoke about before, is based strictly on ordinance. We're required to follow this ordinance in regards to any denials. There's no.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Council Cavanagh.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I see Councilmember Borton waving. I just want to make sure that he's able to hear Lieutenant Harper. I know we've had some issues with that mic there in the middle. I just want to make sure all of council is able to hear him.
It just started to cut.
Just go ahead and speak and see if they can hear.
Can you hear me?
Just eat the mic, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll start over. So in regards to this mobile sales license denial, there's not a whole lot I can speak on in regards to this due to Mr. Medina's rights. So all I can say is, based on ordinance, we have to follow what the rules are in place. There's no wiggle room in making that decision. I strictly have to go off of what's in front of me. So based off of this ordinance, the denial was based on 2 different sections of the code. I don't know if you want me to go over those or if you have those in front of you.
If you want to go over it, that'd be great.
The first portion was in reference to Meridian City Code 3-4-2, subsection A5D2. And this has to do with the application that is in front of you being incomplete or invalid. And the second section was Meridian City Code 3-4-2 AD3D. And this is in regards to Mr. Medina's clerk. How far can I go into this?
So the, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Harper, or Lieutenant Harper, the denial letter states the relevant part of code.
No.
So I think
So I can speak on what's in that letter?
You can speak to what is in the letter.
Okay. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure that I'm not overstepping my bounds. But in regards to that section has to do with, denying the application based off of prior convictions. And I'll stand for any questions.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you, Lieutenant. Mr. Neri, just a reminder for everybody, what is the council's ability to take action regarding this issue?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, under our code, basically the applicant does have a right to appeal, so he does have an opportunity to address you and to address his basis for denial. Lieutenant Harper is correct because of requirements we have with the FBI and backgrounds and record checks. The access to those records is very limited, so we cannot provide them publicly. But basically, Lieutenant Harper has to follow, like you said, what the code prohibits a person from having a mobile sales unit license. The council, in past, has only overturned it when it was an error. And so, if there was an error made in the application or in the record, for example, the person claims that's not them, or that record's been expunged, or something else has occurred with that conviction, then the council can consider that. But other than that, there's no other discretion on that license. So if it falls into these categories, they certainly have the right to appeal, but the council doesn't have the ability to simply overturn it just because that's what the person would like. So it has to either be an error or there's some other outcome that isn't reflected in the record as we had in one case previously.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the lieutenant on this issue?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Would the applicant like to come forward?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot is addressing you.
Okay, I can't hear anything in here. So, Councilman Perot?
Okay, sorry. I don't know if is my microphone working?
It is.
Okay.
They have the volume up.
Okay, so I don't know if Lieutenant Harper or Mr. Neri would like to answer this, but just for the sake of new council members, can you give some background on why 5 years and 15 years for misdemeanors and felonies? Some history on where that came from, where that time frame came from in the city code.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Perot, I can answer that question. So we worked with the police department. I can't recall how long ago this was, but probably 10 years ago, in trying to establish what types of crimes would we have concerns with from a community standpoint and allowing people to either drive mobile units around, such as a food truck or an ice cream truck, or knock on people's doors, and what type of prior offenses and how long is a reasonable period of time to address those. And misdemeanors tend to be a little bit less. Felonies can be a little bit more. Certain levels of felony are forever. So in working with them and trying to find what would make the most sense, that's where those periods of time came from, is we didn't feel that it was something that would, in every circumstance, should disqualify someone forever. But for certain crimes, they are disqualified forever. We don't necessarily want sex offenders knocking on people's doors or running ice cream trucks. So there are some that are disqualifying completely, and there's some that have some time limits. And again, that was a coordinated effort between my department and the police department in coming up with those. So.
Mr.
Council,
Mayor.
any other questions on this topic? Councilman Strader.
I guess a question for Lieutenant Harper, and maybe it's just a disconnect for me in reading the application, and could Lieutenant Harper confirm if the disqualifying matter happened within the time frame to make it disqualifying within our code?
Councilman Strader, Mayor Simison. So in regards to the first section, on the application, it asks, list all infractions, misdemeanors, or felony arrest charges and dispositions, convictions, acquittals, or dismissals, including any probation violations and or bail forfeitures. In that section, that was not completed accurately for that section. In regards to the second, portion of the code, it did fall within the guidelines per that code, based off the information I had available to me.
Thank you.
Council, any further questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
just so I understand, the single question before the council on this appeal is if that one representation on the application is complete and accurate or it's not. Because if it's not, the decision is mandatory and it shall be denied. We don't have any discretion and the appeal ends. If, however, the appellant can get up in front of us and tell us that that representation is true and complete and accurate and nothing was omitted, then I guess we can inquire further, but that's to help frame and facilitate where we need to go. I think that's the first question for the appellant is that answer complete or not?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neri.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Borton, what I thought I heard the lieutenant say was one reason was for incompleteness and the other was for an offense that prohibits you from having it under our code. So it's actually two things. Did I mistake that, Lieutenant?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Council, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Would Mr. Medina like to come forward?
How are we doing today?
Good. If you could say your name and address for the record.
Angelo Medina, and my address 6225 East 9 Iron Lane, Nampa, Idaho. And my fog glasses are getting fogged up, so sorry about that. Do I go first, or is there questions? So to the application, I thought I filled it out right for the questions that it was answering. I put the most important one that was actually been holding me back for a long time in my life. I thought that was going to be, the main one that was going to pop up. Do I admit to the number two? Yes. It's been, I don't know how far your guys' stuff goes back, 13 years? In 13 years, I've been doing sales for probably 9 of it. Outside sales, door to door. I worked really hard from there to where I'm at now. I teach my children every day that just because somebody tells you no, that you get up and you do something different. There's no excuses in this world. So what I did in my past is in my past. I can't change it. Do I regret it? Yeah, I do. But what I'm here for now is because sales is something that I'm into. This is something that's changed, that helps me every day. My kids want to grow up to be a salesman. Telecommunications is the future. I can't stress how much 13 years ago, even longer than that, this situation happened when I was 19, I believe, years old. Okay, I'm 37 now. I understand there's policies, there's procedures. I think the minimum gap after I got the denial is 15 years. So I don't know if it's exactly 13 years. So if I have to wait 2 more years, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to take this as that's just excuse making. I've never relied on any situation in my past to hold me back. I've always applied. Just because I made a mistake doesn't mean we can't change who we are today. I've met plenty of people. I went to Utah for 8 years and came back, right? Since I've been back, I've met a lot of people that are like, whoa. My family asked me who I am. Because who I was then, I was a lost kid. To being a man now, growing up, I take care of my children. I could be at home collecting unemployment this whole time instead of been working. I never go without a job. I'm not an excuse maker. I did what was done. I'd done my time. I've changed 100%, probably 120. I'm a little nervous, so I might ramble a little bit. So if anytime you guys want to cut me off, I'm okay with that. I'm an open book. If you guys have questions, don't be afraid to ask me. I'm going to tell you the truth. Other than that, I mean, guys, I try my hardest every day. It's not even I don't even think about that anymore. This is the first time in I don't know how many years that I've been nervous because I felt like I've done something wrong. I don't get nervous when a cop gets behind me. If I get pulled over, hey, man, you're doing a job, good job. I teach my children nothing but respect for the law because I know the other side of that. That's what it is today. In today's times, you got to teach your children who you want them to be. And my children know that I'm coming here today. They don't know why. They don't know my past. But they know that I'm not going to stop. I understand it's a technicality, or I misprinted out a paper on the form. It's my first time I ever had to do one of those forms. And I did the same thing on my last one. I got through just fine. I worked for CenturyLink for 7.5 years, never had a problem. Maybe it's because I was out of state, I don't know. But I always tell the truth, even on my form. Any questions? Am I rambling? Cut me off anytime, guys.
Council, any questions?
Nothing.
Mr.
I think as of right now, and Mr. Borden, did you have a question?
Yeah, just one. Is it a matter of not only the time frame that you referenced, but without getting into any details, were there omissions in what was disclosed in your application as well?
I don't understand.
Councilman Borden was asking if there was anything that was omitted on the application.
Like left out?
Yes.
I only did, as far as I know, no. To my knowledge, there could have been. I don't really know what we're looking for on the background check. Parole violations, probation violations, those go back 13, almost 14 years. I haven't had a ticket, and there's no misdemeanors in any tickets or anything like that in the last 10.
Okay.
Other than that, I think I don't know. So I might have left some things out there.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Borden.
Go ahead. I don't have any other questions. Just
Okay. Council, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader?
maybe a question for city staff in the case of a denial, and when, it's clear, we don't have, we just have to apply the law. There's not a lot of discretion. I commend you for turning your life around. I think that's great. Can city staff help guide the applicant later on in an offline conversation as to various items that may have been omitted that were a long time ago for future applications, or is that just something that the applicant should have?
Mayor,
Mr. Harper.
Councilwoman Strader, Mayor Simonson, I'd be more than happy, which I have in the past, working with applicants, so can the clerk's office, in regards to any questions. Again, it's very set in the rules and how we have to follow so that we're not applying one thing to one person and different for another. So it's fair across the board for everybody, whether everybody agrees it's fair. But moving forward, anybody that ever has any questions or needs assistance with the application or understanding the totality of the application, I'm always willing to help.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Cavanagh.
an additional question for either our clerk or Lieutenant Harper. As I read the information that's before us, if what the appellant is saying is accurate, and it sounds like that it's their belief that they made a clerical error in filling out the application. But even taking in all the information that you were able to attain from the background check, information that you were able to attain would confirm that whatever past history existed would preclude that individual from receiving a mobile sales license, even if they had filled it out correctly, because the nature of what was learned from the background check prevents them from receiving a mobile sales license. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
based strictly off the verbiage in the code, the second section, 3-4-2 AD3D, still prohibits him from possessing it at this time.
And to my understanding, this code's 10 years old, right?
Oh,
It is, and it's been, I think this is the second or third time we've heard this type of an issue in the last couple of years that I'm aware of, at least.
Yes, sir.
And it counts generally held to the same standard.
Yes.
For those.
Anything else?
Council, any further questions?
no.
Okay. That's
All
it.
right.
Thank
Well,
you.
appreciate you guys' time.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Council? Mr. Borton?
there very well may be, when these things come up every couple of years, or really, it's pretty rare, but to make constructive use of these, I would highly encourage Mr. Medina to do a couple of things. I appreciate his candor, but be open and complete in responding to these things, and use that as a tool to come to the city and say, hey, I'm a fantastic person who's made great progress, and your code as written has unintended consequences, and it captures people like me who deserve this chance to pursue their sales interests in a way that's not intended. Don't ever omit things or be incomplete and hope it gets through. That's the wrong approach, good person or not. I think there's something we can all learn from what we've seen here, that there very well may be some circumstances that should invite us to explore this code and maybe craft it in a way that doesn't snag an individual in this situation. Here, it's a clear mandatory prohibition. I think the appeal has to be denied. But this, and any applicant, I think, is best served by being totally candid and complete, and then coming to council or staff and saying, hey, I've got an idea on how you can adjust your code to allow me to proceed forward. I think that's the only way to constructively go forward. It doesn't provide any relief in this case, but that's what I would encourage them to do going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Borton.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh?
I guess in terms, we do need to take some action on this if I'm
Yes.
correct. So, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate Mr. Medina being here tonight, and for what it's worth, I think your kids should be real proud of you. Somebody who works hard, continue to grow and find success. Council finds themselves in a very precarious situation on this, and that it's our job to uphold and follow the law. So that being said, I move that we deny the appeal of denial of mobile sales unit MSU-20-0038.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to deny the appeal. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh?
I see there's someone in the audience that's raising their hand. I don't know if the process allows for other public testimony on this.
It's up to you. I mean, there's nothing in the code that prohibits additional testimony, but I don't know what. Again, it's your call, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to, especially since the motion has already been made, but I don't know that since there's not discretion on this issue, I don't know that public testimony is going to change any of the outcome from that standpoint. So we'll move forward with discussion under the motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Holden.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we're bound to uphold the city code. As Councilman Borton pointed out, if there's changes needed, we want to work with people and be fair. But what we have is what we have, and I appreciate Mr. Medina turning his life around and moving forward and being successful and being a good example for his kids. But we're at that situation where no other testimony or anything like that is going to change what we have to do in our position for this appeal.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I would just add, Mr. Medina, it sounds like if part of the application was confusing or there was an aspect of what it was requiring that wasn't clear, it sounded like city staff was willing to walk you through that. And I would highly encourage you to go through that process, so that when you are eligible, you can come to us or use the method Mr. Borton outlined to suggest changes in the future. But I also commend you for making changes and wish you the best of luck. But we just have to apply the law the way it's written.
If there's no further comments or questions, other discussion on the motion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Cavanagh?
Aye.
Perot?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Byrne?
All ayes, and appeal of the motion to deny is denied through upholding the appeal with the ayes. Sorry, it's awkward enough from that standpoint. All right, thank you, Mr. Medina, for being here. Item number 3 is a public hearing for the Villas at 12 Oaks, which is H 2020-0014. I will open this public hearing with staff comment and turn this over to Sonia.
Give me just a moment, Mr. Mayor. Am I sharing? Alrighty, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This application, development agreement modification and annexation and zoning, was continued from the July 17th council hearing. I'll just run over the basics real quick. This site consists of 6.63 acres of land. It's zone R1 in the county, and it's located at 115 South Linder Road on the west side of Linder, just south of West Franklin Road. Comp plan designation is commercial, and they are modifying the existing development agreement for the multifamily development to the west to incorporate this property as a subsequent phase of that development, rather than require a new separate agreement for this later phase. The commercial future land use map designation does allow multifamily development in the CG district. And I'll just to recap, the council asked the applicant to consider commercial uses on a portion of this property and to come back tonight to discuss that. So I'll defer to the applicant. Do you have any questions for me? They did want to, just to reiterate, Mr. Mayor, they did want to annex 6.63 acres with TNR zoning for the development of 8 multifamily structures containing a total of 64 apartment units at a gross density of 13.9 units per acre, which is consistent with that allowed in the commercial future land use designation. And multifamily developments are principal permitted use in the TNR district. Hopefully that helps jog your memory on that.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neri.
I said one more thing to that from a decision point. Part of the conversation, if you recall, was the commercial on that piece was not contemplated either at planning and zoning or in the application or in the public noticing. So part of the consideration the council was going to consider tonight, if Mr. Jewett has commercial application to want to do that, to remand it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission so the staff can review for compliance with code, as well as public notice that a commercial application is being sought on that particular location.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff at this time? No. Would the applicant like to come forward? If you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Either one work?
I go on that side.
Mayor and Council, Jim Jewett, 776 East Riverside Drive, Suite 204, Eagle, Idaho. As you recall, there was a lot of questions at our previous hearing about commercial that I couldn't necessarily answer, and I asked that I be allowed to go get those answers. So what I've done is consulted with Jeffrey Hall, who's a commercial broker in town, and I would like to defer my time to him so he can address those commercial questions. Then I can be available after that for any questions or follow-up.
Mr. Hall, if you'd like to come forward. And if you state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Jeffrey Hall, 4299 East Goldstone in Meridian. Mr. Mayor, council members, it is so good to see you in person. It has been so long, so it's great we're able to get together. My comments are very direct and to the point. Please note that none of my companies or myself have any affiliation with this property whatsoever, with the subject property. But we did, I'll talk about here in a minute, develop the adjoining properties. So that's where we have a lot of history since 2002 in regards to this property and the intents of it. So I'm the current management member of Northwest Commercial Advisors based in Meridian, and my experience is in land development, commercial leasing, and sales. I'm also on the leadership team of the Chamber of Commerce, where my number one goal is to support economic growth in our business community of Meridian. Obviously, when the question came up about commercial, that raises my awareness. I love commercial. I'm all about promoting business in Meridian. In this case, I was involved in the original Hart's Corner retail project, which was built in '02, and the subsequent Franklin retail project, which was in '04. We have sold each portion of that project throughout the years, and we finalized our last sale in 2019. So we no longer have any ownership in the entire stretch of property along Franklin. The area traffic counts and the commercial demand around these projects was weak, and we had several tenants that turned over, and we're also collecting below market rates from the tenants, unfortunately. It was a tough go for commercial in that corner. I can't deny that, and I think a lot of people, besides those of us that entertain ourselves at the firehouse, know that. So the firehouse is the one that has remained consistent for some reason. It did go through 4 owners, though, I'll tell you that. As the area continues to grow, several properties are still available, including the adjoining 12 Oaks commercial pads, which have Franklin frontage, but have not been appealing to any users. They've had no activity that I can see on them at all since the time they were listed. The synergy of the submarket has absolutely moved to the 10-mile area between I-84 and Franklin, where BV and Brighton are currently offering 127 acres of office, retail, medical, hospitality, and multifamily. In the near future, we are also going to see demand moving towards the Waltman area off the Meridian Road interchange, with a very large project there as well. The area surrounding the intersection of Franklin and Linder has no demand for more retail or office. Currently, the area consists of aged retail, industrial, the school bus barn, trash transfer station, and aged office space. There is absolutely no demand for commercial in this area, especially since it doesn't have any Franklin frontage at all. The parcel you're talking about that's in subject parcel here is behind the development, behind a big old concrete fence, and along Linder, where it's prominently residential. The highest and best use for this property, again, is multifamily in my eyes. Finally, one last detail. When we developed the commercial properties at Franklin and Linder, we were required to construct this massive concrete wall, which we all see there today. There is no cross-access agreement in place from the Jackson's property or the car wash property to the subject property, and Jackson's has relayed to me as early as this last week that they are not supportive of any type of cross-access into that project at all. With that said, having the concrete wall there seals the deal, and the use of the subject property is best suited for multifamily. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Hall or Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
Jeffrey, how are you?
Good, sir.
Good. What do you think the highest and best use of this property will be in, 5 years or later when, the Linder overpass will be, built and completed? Do you think in your perspective that
Well,
will
if we, again, I know that's a priority for the city is to get Linder overpass done. If that happens, again, that whole area from the Linder overpass up to, Franklin, of course, is all residential. So the corners have that traditional commercial on the corners, but everything behind it is prominently residential. Matter of fact, there was a nursery back there at one time, a landscape nursery, that's gone. So, I can see, unfortunately, that won't change. I don't think that's gonna change. I think our 10 mile and our Meridian Road is key right now for commercial, especially on the retail side. You may see some light office users that may go back there eventually, but right now, there's no reason to at this point. And, unfortunately, we know how things go with funding and priorities. We can only hope the Linder happens. We really need that. And that will actually, of course, help the traffic counts, because right now the traffic counts are light there, just over 11,000 cars a day. I mean, when I put in Hark's Corner, you guys, I was right there at about the same traffic counts. I'm not seeing any more, and that's crazy. And once we put Linder in, we're gonna see those traffic counts at that intersection increase, and thank goodness, because that may help the retail.
All good? Thanks, Jeffrey. Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Mr. Joe, would you have any additional comments before we turn this over to anybody who may wish to testify in this item from the public?
Yes, Mayor, Council, Jim Jewett again. I think we've done a quality project in our initial phases of 12 Oaks. We've provided good open space in a half-court basketball court, large grassy open spaces, tot lot, and the pool with the clubhouse. And we did all that with the idea of expanding into this property. And I think that we've done a quality project, and we will continue to do that. And we wish that you would be behind us in that and grant us our approval. I have contracted to tear the house down. I know that was an issue, so I did, subsequent to our last meeting, go ahead and release my contractor to go ahead and get that tore down. I'm sure it'll be down by sometime in September. That corner, again, as discussed, I'm okay with putting a retail or commercial pad on that corner because of its frontage on Linder. And I'm sure that can do something, as Mr. Neri spoke of last, that can be handled at a later date. We just leave it as open space for now, because we have no intentions. There's nothing that we want to do on it today. And like Jeffrey testified on, we have 4 lots within our original 12 Oaks commercial and 1 in our 12 Oaks apartment phase. So we have 5 retail pads now that are still sitting empty. So I don't see that there's a financial need now, nor in the foreseeable future. And unfortunately, it's hard for me to forecast out 5 years or farther in this ever-changing world. So I would hope that you can appreciate and see my vision with this and can support me in it, and I would ask for your approval. With that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you. And I don't know if this came up last time, Sonia, or if this would be for the applicant, is what turning movements would be allowed on access to Linder Road at this location, likely from ACHD, if any, ride-in, ride-out only? Due to its proximity to the corner?
Mr. Mayor, Council, honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it would be full at this time or not.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that.
Mr. Jewett.
At this point in time, it would be a full access. With the widening, it would go to right in, right out.
Thank you.
So for the foreseeable future, it would be full.
Mr. Mayor,
Council Administrator.
I guess a question for the applicant, and just to, I guess, fully understand. So if the application is being revised to remove the existing home, what will be there in its place? Will that be open space, or what is the intention at this point.
Mr. Mayor, Council, our intention was just to leave it for open space. We would just simply remove the building and leave it open space, with the potential that if we did come back and want to put a retail or professional building there, we would have to come back through the modification of the DA and go through another set of hearings to do that. So our intention now would just be to leave it as open space.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
Mr. Hall, I apologize if I missed this. What's the size of that? What's the size of the property that's in that section that the house sits on?
It was almost 7 acres of land.
No, I understand that. Just the area where the house is currently sitting.
Oh.
That would be,
Sorry,
what
that's
would be the
pretty
pad, how big would the pad site be?
Mayor, Council, I can only approximate it, but I would think that I could put, I'm just looking back to my other commercial area, sorry. So this lot here is 3,500 square foot pad, and it looks to be equal. So I would say somewhere in the 3,000 to 3,500 square foot pad.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Schrader.
Maybe a question for staff, but just to confirm, if that commercial pad was designated as a future commercial site, that it sounds like the applicant would still be meeting the open space requirements that we currently have, just to confirm that.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I don't believe that area was included as any of the open space. He actually has, well, actually, we didn't require open space calcs with this because he wasn't getting detailed approval of the use at this time. The multifamily use is principally permitted in the TNR district, so they didn't have to go through a conditional use permit. So we would evaluate that at the time he comes in for CZC and Certificate of Zoning Compliance and Design Review. So they would have to meet the minimum standards.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Nair.
And for the purpose of the modification of the development agreement, I guess I wanted, if Mr. Jewett could clarify, when you're saying open space, you were talking about usable open space, some level of recreational space, even if it's just grass.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Attorney Neri. Yes, so it would be, under the code, you can have just green open space if it was a minimum of 50 by 100, I believe. And so we would meet that minimum qualification, so it would be usable space.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
just to follow up, it seems like it would be silly for council to approve a project that didn't meet what our normal standard of open space would be. I guess from staff's perspective, conceptually, does this look like it would, or are there any major flaws that we don't think it would meet the open space? Would just, from my perspective, that would be better to know now than way down the line in a different process.
Mr. Mayor, if I could answer that question.
Sure.
Yes, we did, Sonia did request of us an overall combination of the existing 12 Oaks and the new 12 Oaks, and we gave her a new open space calculation. So it's in the file. Actually, I don't have it here, but she would have it if she did. And we do have an open space calculation that we exceeded the open space calculation by a considerable amount.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, that was quite a while ago, and I forgot about that. Thank you. I did harass you to submit that.
She harasses a lot.
Yes, I just wanted to, even though we weren't doing a detailed review at this time, I too wanted to ensure that we were going to be okay on meeting those standards. And regardless, they have to meet the standards. So if they didn't have enough, they'd have to remove a building. So staff isn't concerned about that. But yes, they jogged my memory. They did meet the overall standards and exceeded it.
Council, any further questions for the applicant? you, Mr. Jewett.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. I would open it up for any public testimony at this time. Mr. Court, do we have anyone sign up to testify on this item?
Mr. Mayor, there was no online, and in person was only Mr. Hall.
Okay. Well, Mr. Hall, do you have any additional public testimony? Would the applicant like to make any final comments from where he just left 30 seconds ago? Okay. Then, counsel, I'll turn this over to you for discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Barrett.
jogging my memory, wasn't there some questions or concerns last time in regard to water pressure or like something to do with water? And if so, were those concerns, is there an agreement that those concerns were taken care of?
Mayor, Council, the question had to do with sewer capacity at the lift station at
Okay.
Whitestone. And yes, we were okay with the comments from Public Works, and we will go through their study process to ensure that there is adequate capacity or do any upgrades to ensure that there is capacity. We're okay with the language as written.
Mr. Mayor.
That's current language.
Councilman Barrett.
We don't have to add that to the motion.
I do not believe so, but we do have Mr. Dolsby on Zoom if he'd like to weigh in on that comment.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Burnt, there was a modification to I think it was condition B12, which requires the sewer. Originally, we were requiring the sewer to go a different direction. So the condition now reads, the applicant shall be responsible to determine whether adequate capacity exists in the receiving sewer system, including 2 lift stations, to accept the additional flow from this development. And then it says if upgrades are necessary, the applicant shall be responsible for all costs associated with said upgrades. And we've reviewed that and are in favor of that condition as it stands right now.
So you are correct, Councilman Barrett.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
I don't know if this is a question for staff or for the applicant. I think what I'm still a little fuzzy on, this being a DA modification, is does that area that is where the current home is, does that need to be specifically classified? Its use need to be specifically classified at this point? Do we need to, or is it just whatever, when they come in with the CUP, is it whatever use is possible within the TNR?
Mr. Mayor, I can address that. The applicant just testified that he does have that house scheduled to be removed, so he is planning to remove that. Even if he didn't, they would have to come in to get a change of use in that, and you can place a provision in the development agreement if you'd like for him to remove the house, so there's no issue in the future about it. If you'd like a safeguard on that.
Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, a follow-up.
Councilman Pro.
I realize that the applicant's not making a decision about what's going to go in its place at this point, but if I may make a recommendation, if there is enough physical space to consider some sort of childcare or daycare facility, there's so many apartments coming in that area, and there's a significant need for that in that location. And I'm not necessarily meaning for the apartment dwellers, but I mean just somebody that would come in and purchase that property for that use. I can see that being a really great option for that neighborhood, being near the schools. So I realize that you can't get somebody in that doesn't want to do that, but
Council, any further questions or discussion on this item? Or do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
let's get things going. I move that we, close the public hearing on, item 3, H-2020-0014, Villas at 12 Oaks East.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
just some comments to consider. Appreciate Mr. Hall being here tonight and shining some light about the feasibility of commercial. I really respect his opinion, and if he feels commercial isn't viable in that area, I tend to support that. I don't know if I necessarily then go to that we need to just stack it with more multifamily. So I voiced my concerns about that at the last public hearing. To me, commercial seemed to be appropriate transition to get a little bit of everything in that area. If the commercial is not going to work, then the commercial is not going to work. But I don't then move to being supportive of leaving that all multifamily. So I'm not in support of the DA. I appreciate what's trying to be accomplished. It just doesn't rise to the threshold of me being able to support it. Appreciate being here tonight, Mr. Jewett.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
a little on the fence. I appreciate the overture to leave a piece of the frontage, as a potential future commercial pad off Linder. That might sway me. I do feel that the city's going to move toward the Linder overpass, and I totally understand Mr. Hall's commentary. I don't know if we make long-term decisions based on the economic viability of a use at one point in time. Part of my struggle. We're really underweight commercial. Sounds like it's not working right now. The schools in this area were not particularly hard hit yet, although I suspect that's coming. I'm still formulating my thoughts. I'm not there yet either. I have some concerns still. I'd like to listen to everybody else's opinion.
My 2 cents for whatever it's worth is I agree. I think that there will eventually be a need for light office uses. Yeah, I understand that commercial is not maybe what is right for this area, but daycare, dentists, other things that will support the residential area. And I don't want to look at Google to see what's around there right now, but I don't know that there is a lot of those type of services in that part, at least. Memory, I don't drive down that area that frequently, and unfortunately I've never been to the firehouse, so that's something I'm going to have to evidently change at some point in time.
Mr. Mayor.
I struggle personally. Councilwoman Perot.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Were you finished?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, so I drive by that area daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and the little retail center that's there to the east on the southeast corner, it has had users in and out since I've lived in this area pretty frequently. I know they've struggled to keep businesses in there, and I think it's probably a traffic thing. And now that Linder is widening up to Cherry Lane, I anticipate that you may have more people taking lender, even without the overpass, because trying to get, when you would go past the school, and then you would bottleneck at the railroad stop. I never took that stretch of Linder because it was always just kind of a pain to get from Franklin to Cherry because it was too small, too narrow. You've got the school, you've got the traffic zones. With Linder widening there, with then improvements along where the railroad track is going to be, I'm wondering if people aren't going to start using Linder to come from north to south more frequently, especially getting on the two interchanges, Meridian Road and 10 Mile Road. And I wonder if that isn't actually going to improve some of the you know, retail uses or some of the neighborhood uses there. I don't know, just speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised actually if people start using that stretch of Linder from Cherry to Franklin a lot more frequently once they're finished. And that being said, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm in favor of you know, denying this and having all of those 6 acres, 7 acres stay open for commercial uses. I'm just like Councilwoman Strader, I'm still a little bit on the fence on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Barrett.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Hall and his expertise and what he does. I might agree and say that, you know, maybe right now, not a lot of use for maybe retail in that location, but like what's said from other council members, I do believe that there's potential use for other forms of office space and such. As a council, you know, it's important that we look at the zoning designations for different areas, and I believe that they're there for a reason. And you know, there's also times when, you know, we make decisions not based upon what the status quo is, but what that looks like, you know, 2, 5, 10, 15 years down the line. And I do believe in the future, especially with Linder being what it's projected to be, that the best use, in my opinion, for this area would be commercial.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
again, I don't have a good sense about where council wants to go on this, so I'm going to take a stab at this, and we'll see. Mr. Mayor, I move that we deny item 3, Villa at 12 Oaks, H-2020-0014, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Perot.
just some clarification, because this is an annexation application, would a denial prohibit the applicant from coming back for a year?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so under our code, yes, essentially the same application. It would be the director's determination on whether or not it's allowed. So it depends on what it looks like.
Mr. Mayor, unless it's substantial change.
Substantial change.
Correct.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion? If not, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Cavanagh?
Aye.
Perot?
Aye.
Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Burnt?
Aye.
All ayes. Motion to deny passes. Thank you. Council, moving on to item 4 on the agenda, ordinance H 2019-0123. I ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance will actually have a different number. We did not assign that leading into the meeting, but it will be a 2020 ordinance. It's related to H 2019-0123, Sky Mesa Highlands, for annexation of a portion of the southeast quarter of Section 32, Township 3 North, Range 1 East, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, as described in Attachment A, and annexing certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the City of Meridian as requested by the City of Meridian, establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 31.96 acres of land from RUT to R4, medium low density residential zoning district in the Meridian City Code, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you. You've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that'd like it read in its entirety? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Council Cavanagh.
question for Mr. Clerk. Chris, I thought you started something about a different ordinance number, but then you read the one that was on our agenda, so I just want to make sure that I'm tracking correctly.
Correct, yes. The ordinance is related to this hearing application from 2019. Normally, we have the ordinance number in place. We're not required by code to assign it one until it passes, and we, in the changeover in the system, we neglected to notice we had not yet assigned it a number. But it can be passed as the ordinance by a title, and then we'll assign it a number.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Council Cavanagh.
I move that we approve then ordinance H-2019-0123, Sky Mesa Highlands, of suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is there any item under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
I'd like to maybe possibly have a discussion in regard to just taking a look at what our ordinance looks like in regard to mobile cells, licenses. Leave it at that.
Duly noted. Did I have another person who had a...
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Farrell, was that...
Yes. So I don't want to discuss what Councilmember just presented, but if council decides that's a meeting topic they'd like to discuss, I don't know what code says about how the mobile sales units differ from the brick and mortar requirements in that regard. So that would be something that would be great and educational for us new council members. And then I wanted to bring up a possible future meeting topic, and I'd like to hear my fellow council members' thoughts on this. We had 4 applications for residential developments along Black Cat in the last 2 weeks, and we have more applications coming. And so I would like an opportunity for all of us to look at the big picture of how many units have been approved, broken down by type of unit in that Northwest Meridian area, since we are considering that one of our priority areas, and just take a look at ACHD's 5-year plan for Black Cat and possibly McDermott, and then also what, if any, limited information we have regarding enrollment, school enrollment, just a bigger picture view of what's happening in that square mile and a half, so that the next time these applications come before us, we have a good idea of what's going on in the entire area. So I understand from the planning department that they do have information available and easily ready to share with us, so it's not something that should take a lot of preparation.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Any other items under this item? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
I move.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye.